So from a big retailer standpoint, some of them have decided to build their own, right? So like a Walmart and an Instacart have built their own ecosystems and their own technology and their own tech stack. Target, not as much. So for example, they partner with some of the sell side platforms like a Criteo. And then same with some of those smaller retailers, like that is it's not feasible to build their own tech stack. And that is a huge undertaking to build the infrastructure to have a retail media network. And so that is where a sell side platform or that tech can come in handy to help accelerate and explode, not only explode that growth, take care of that explosive growth, but not have all that overhead from a technical standpoint.
Can you explain how the brands are kind of in this game with the retailers and sort of the role they play and how they can sort of maximize what they're doing on these bigger sites and littler sites?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a brand perspective, it's a fine line in some cases. So they have these retailer relationships that in some cases are legacy. They've worked with some brands that have had relationships with a particular retail for 50 plus years when you think about it. And then you've got some of these newer emerging digital first brands that are now getting into some of the bigger retailers or the smaller retailers. And really what to look at from a brand perspective is you're working with the retailer on your relationship in terms of how you're going to grow sales in store and how are you going to emphasize where the eyeballs are. So obviously the pandemic spurred that and we had a lot more eyeballs online than we did say physically on a shelf. So a brand can then enable and act, decide how it is they want to show up digitally and physically, and then to what volume. And they may also work with, say, like their merchandising or their buying team at that retailer to figure out what products are going to be supported at what volume and at what level and when and all that kind of fun stuff. And then for new emerging brands that might be like say in a smaller retailer or new to the space, new to retail media in general, it's a good way to get visibility. And they have a lot of different options in terms of, do you want to go as like a simple, like straight out of the box, everybody's got it kind of ad unit, like a sponsored product? Or do you go bigger and you lean into that first party data that the retailer may be offering through a variety of ways to access it?
Yeah, so that leads us to investment and the role of the agencies. Of course, you're very involved with it, and we've been doing reporting. A lot of the big holding companies are beefing up their commerce. How does sort of media spend and commerce work together, and where might that be going?
So the answer I think is probably just like, yes, it's going and it's going up and it's going to the right. And the question has been, where's the budget coming from? Whose budget? Is that the right place where that budget should be coming from? So a lot of shopper trade dollars came in. I'm even starting to see some search, like some of the more classic locations, with Facebook's deprecation of tracking with and Apple, like is some of the money going to move from there? One of the things that has pretty much stayed consistent is that it needs to be supported, whether or not that is at a high volume. And some of the larger brands with some of the larger holding companies, like those budgets have always been fairly large, and it's just a matter of where you want to place those bets versus some of the smaller guys that may not feel as if they have as much control, for sure.
Great. And we hear a lot about media as being a part of the mix. I know it's not central to your practice, but certainly I'm sure you're seeing what's going on in the industry with television, with Roku, with TikTok, with Twitter and YouTube. And there's a lot of conversation amongst the platforms, innovation with the platforms around commerce. What do you think is exciting and where might that be going?
So everywhere, it's going everywhere. And it's funny is when you talk about, what's next in retail media and how you define it. So for example, in-store audio has started to become a feature an old feature that is now new again and is technically counted as retail media. And then you have with some of these social channels, they've created direct integrations with the retailers to allow the retailer to layer in their first party data to sell via Pinterest, via Facebook, whatever it is, and then add in your TikToks, your YouTubes, whatever it is, whatever's new, whatever's next. At some point, the question then becomes, how does the customer acquire that item? Is it D2C? You're going to have a YouTube or Snapchat campaign and it's going to drive to a D2C, and that's how you're going to measure success, and that's where the sale is going to take place. Or in the case of retail media, and more likely, depending on your category, that's where the sale is going to take place. Like this is going to be a basket ad, especially if items are, for example, like a price point under $20 or something, right? It's not feasible usually to ship that. A lot of times it has to do also with frequency, and if it's a replenishment buy, and how are you tagging into the customer the journey that they're already making because they're already at that retailer. And so from a new stuff and commerce and search and social and the classic, what we think of like an online marketing, it's really starting to meld into and melt into retail media. But then the question then becomes, can retail media then help us close the loop? So I know that I used 6 different social channels to push shoppers of various demographics to the places that they are, those retailers that they're at. The question is, well, what did it get for me?
Which brings me to our last question about performance, what you want from your partners, your technology partners. I know you work with many. What's sort of the missing link, or what do you aspire to have in your toolkit that maybe you don't have now?
So many things, but the number one thing that everyone is asking for, and is unfortunately one of the harder pieces to solve for, is what did it get for me, right? So like if the retail media is spent through a social channel, if it is spent through a programmatic, can the retailer truly close the loop? And in some cases it is more difficult than others because how the transaction happens. Is there a loyalty program? How do we get there? Can we even just look at total in-store sales relative to a campaign that was run and look at parallel lift and those incrementality studies? So that is probably my number one ask, and probably also one of the biggest lifts. But I know, for example, technology partners are working on it in general, and so are some of the retailers, because they kind of have to. You can't ask a brand to spend $1 million on sponsored products and then only optimize to an online return, because we know that 90% of those sales happen in a store. Like it doesn't make sense. So that's one of them. And the other one would be, in order to answer that question, we have to settle on attribution. So attribution is all over the place. Is it 7 days? Is it 14 days? Is it last click? Is it multi-touch? How do we want to look at that? And everybody has a different answer.